Lola Bunny is like 60 years old if you think about it, and she's looking good, man.
Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. This is another episode of the Scoped Exposure podcast. Very excited for this one, as I've mentioned this on a couple other episodes where season 3 of focus of mine is to kind of, hardcore is bread and butter for this show, but I think just expanding a little bit to the other genres that clearly touch the hardcore scene, but are just like a little out on the outskirts of that as far as genre-wise. So I'm very excited about today's guest. We got Devin, vocalist, or as he's like to say, the phlegm artist of SANGUISUGABOGG. Dude, thank you for joining us on the show today.
Of course, Spencer. Thank you so much for having me, man. Stoked to be here.
Absolutely. So, Devin, I think a huge excitement piece for me for this interview is I've talked about this a lot with friends at shows or in passing about just like the wave of like new death metal bands just getting a lot of love and praise within like the hardcore space and just seeing
Mhm,
the crossover. And
mhm.
so now to be able to have someone like yourself in one of those said bands to be able to talk about that from your perspective is definitely something I'm really excited about. I also think Sanguisugabogg is just like, as a band aesthetically, you guys like, are unapologetic about how you present yourselves. And I think that has
Yeah.
paid off in the band's success. But before we get into the music chats, it's a must here to check a bev before we get into the episode. So it's tradition for the guests to go first. So tell me what
Okay.
you've brewed for the episode today.
Yeah. So something pretty popular in the Midwest. It's a store called Kroger, and they
Okay.
have a private selection. So I got like one of their Venetian roasts. I got the strongest one, um, and it's just like the way I like coffee, man. It's like very bitter. It's
Mhm.
like a smack in the face, like first thing as soon as you drink it, wake up. But yeah, that's what I brewed today because I just got back at like 10 o'clock at night after spending like 17 hours at the airport coming back from Europe. So definitely been chugging down a lot of these.
Yes, very
Uh,
much so. Because you were mentioning before we were recording, you were just in Europe, correct?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
We did. We were there for a total of 21 days. Um, no days off except for the day before we actually left for the airport. But that day took up, a drive from Bologna, Italy, over to Munich, Germany. So it was like a 9-hour drive, like with breaks and everything.
That's cool. Before we get going, Devin, I'm just getting a lot of like, not like static, but it sounds like the mic from your headphones is like scratching against.
With
So
my beard or
either,
something.
yeah, could we either uh try changing the placement of that, or maybe just switching from headphones just like to just your phone?
Yeah, I could do just the phone. Fair.
Yeah.
Let's see. Can you still hear me?
Yes, and that sounds
Perfect.
phenomenally better. So if you're cool with
Good.
that, then I think we would roll the rest of the way this way.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fine.
Cool. Yeah. Um, yeah, it is wild to be able to be overseas and playing so many shows and then like kind of like like how do you combat the jet lag side of things, or is this kind of your first time and you're just like I have to stick to the coffee as much as I can?
Yeah. I mean, I'm used to like just because I'm this past year and a half, I've been so used to touring. I've kind of gotten used to being uncomfortable, which is weird, you know. Uh, Sometimes like I'll realize I sleep better on like my sectional at home that's rough, other than my bed, just because like my body's just like grown accustomed to it.
Hmm.
So it's not it's not as bad as I thought it was going to be. It honestly, it feels a lot better being home. It sucked while I was in Europe because we would play at what we would think what to them like 9 o'clock at night, but for us it felt like it was like 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
Right.
So if I felt like I could run marathons like on stage, and then we get done, we go to the hostel or hotel, and then it's like I'm up until 5 or 6 o'clock the next morning because it just doesn't. My body's not used to it,
Hmm.
so it actually feels a lot better like coming back. Um, every day could be different, but for right now, I've kind of grown accustomed to it. I woke up at like 6 a.m. and just ready to take on the day like right away as soon as I got out of bed.
Yeah. I just like the sentiment that you said there of just being used to being uncomfortable, because I think
Mhm.
that's like a strength for a lot of like people, and I feel like a lot of people learn that while being in bands, like sleeping on floors,
Yeah,
like overnight drives, like it kind of like builds up a level of thicker skin that most people just would never even get exposed to.
yeah, yeah. It definitely takes a different kind of person, someone that is just like not used to being home or having a home like in the beginning. Anyways, those are the kinds of people that can really like tough it out and stuff on tour.
Totally. Yeah, beverage wise for me, it was going to be the second podcast of today, but we had a cancellation. And the I did a podcast last night where my guest had like a water jug that was bigger than his head. So I was like, it kind of like put into perspective that I need to be drinking a little bit more water. It kind of like
Oh
inspired me
yeah,
a little bit. So I'm just going to be drinking straight up water from the Triple B, Nalgene water bottle. Picked this up at Act Like You Know Fest in Tulsa a couple weekends ago because we were playing that. And yeah, we're just keeping it simple, but in a dope beverage. So um, without further ado, Devin, cheers to you, my friend.
cheers, man.
So, Devin, any new guests that I have here on the show, I always like to get a bit of context about, how they got into this whole thing, hardcore, heavy music, alternative music, however you want to spin it. So, take me way back in time to like the first time you were hearing like gutturals or like any kind of like heavy aesthetic that kind of put you on the path initially for this whole thing.
Yeah, for sure. So I love this question because the way I explain it is so my parents, um, they were 18 when they were pregnant with me, so they were very young. So that being said, my dad was a teenager in the 80s. So growing up, I listened to a lot of the same music that he did. Um, I remember being as early as 5 years old and already listening to like Sepultura, um, Crowbar, and Obituary, just to name a few.
Mm.
And I remember, my dad had like a center console and he had like booklets and he had a bunch of CDs in his vehicle. And I remember picking up Venom's Black Metal when I was like 9 years old, and I was just like, oh yeah, I remember like my dad listening to this, so I'm gonna take it into my room and listen to it. And I had like an 8 like CD changer in my room, and I'd always like fill it up and listen to a bunch of stuff. But what was actually in that CD case ended up being Morbid Angels, Blessed Are the Sick.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, and so I think like my dad had a CD actually in a CD player, and he just put that one in there for the time being, or whatever. And I jammed it and was just like, "What the hell's going on? I don't understand this like at all." And then I think over time it just kind of like grew on me, and then I remember being like 13 years old, and I was sent to my room. I wasn't allowed to watch TV. So like I think to rebel against my parents, I just played music really loud, and it was that same CD, and I just ended up cranking it. And by like the third song on the album, I was like, I like this. I
Right.
like, and I remember being like really young and just hearing like distorted guitars on like car commercials and stuff, or like the new Chevy, whatever the hell. And it'd be like a guitar strumming, and I would just imagine like a monster singing for that band or something. And then so like it turned into that, and then it wasn't until um like junior high and high school I I was going to shows, I was 14, 13, 14 when I started going to like hardcore and heavier shows. And just from friends like listening to other stuff, and me thinking like it has to be like brutal, more brutal than that, more heavier than that. So I would just go deep diving on the internet and find a bunch of bands, and that's when really it just kind of had me in a chokehold, and I was consuming it like every day.
Right. I love the I love the idea that you're blasting music just out of spite to your
Yeah,
parents, and you don't
yeah,
even necessarily like the music, but then
yeah,
3 songs in, you're like, "I actually do fuck with this."
yeah, yeah, yeah,
No, I think it's very interesting, and it's interesting too because there's been lots of people who've come on the podcast where their parents, had a lot of influence on them when it came to like the music they were listening to. But I think it's interesting to me with your dad being, having you so young, that it, still the timing of that because sometimes people would do that, but their dads are like in their mid 30s to 40s. So
right.
I'm sure like, was that kinship of just, like, being, like, closer in age because your dad was so young? Like, do you think that had an effect of, like
Yeah, yeah, I think that was very much into it because there wasn't that much of an age gap. And then when it came time for me to drive and like try to make up bands of my own, I was already in bands with people just as old as my dad, if not older, because they were listening to the same music at the same time.
Right. Yeah.
So,
That's very, very interesting. So you were kinda mentioning a little bit about, like, the, starting to go to shows locally. Were you always like, "I'm gonna do vocals in a band," or were you playing instruments kind of prior to stepping into that?
so I always wanted to pick up an instrument, but I was so extremely attention deficit that I couldn't commit my mind to it completely.
Sure.
So it made more sense for me to always be the story, I guess, and like make up crazy utopias in my mind, and just talk about them. And that that for some reason always became like way more interesting for me on that aspect of it. And which was cool because like every band that was like forming like around me, all my friends that played instruments, they couldn't find a singer. So I was the only one that was like at least like ballsy enough to give it a shot, you know?
Sure. Okay. And that does happen where some people are like, either no one is gonna grab the mic or this. Like I've been in bands where the person that has grabbed the mic kind of has a quote unquote singeritis. Like they're just like kind of like entitled, or they're like kind of derail the advancements of a band. So some people are like called to that role, and they're like, I got to
Yeah.
do this.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I always kind of like clinged on to um the front people in bands because like I don't know, man, like I relate heavy music to um feelings and emotion. And especially at the time, at the age I was when I started being in bands, I, I had a lot of stuff I wanted to get out there. So
Right.
yeah, definitely felt more good to scream and yell at people than take the time to learn an instrument that I'm probably not going to end up being good at anyways. You know?
Yeah, which is funny because like like I guess like death metal is maybe a bit a little exception to this, but like when it comes to like playing in hardcore bands, like it's hilarious because like half the people start there's so many classic examples of people that start bands that they don't know how to play the instruments, but they're just kind of figuring it out.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there's definitely some aspects in metal music where you can do that as well. But I do like what you said where it's just like um the feeling and the emotive aspect of it
Yeah,
to be able to like get stuff out that you're holding inside of you. And
yeah,
that's always been something where like I've always been a guitar player, but I've always connected with vocalists as well as far as like them writing songs about specific things that I can
mm,
connect with at any stage of my life.
yeah, yeah. I mean, especially early on, that's what I wanted to kind of be like the focal point in any band I was in was like, let's talk about growing up. Let's talk about being broke and living on stamps, and having a family member that just keeps failing on you, and like all kinds of stuff. And then eventually it was just like, I just want to sing about shit that could never happen, or like, or something so like far out of left field that people are scratching their head like, why, what, and why. So
Mhm. So, and I think that's something that I want to hit on a little bit later in the episode as far as like some of the not like the misconceptions about like death metal, but like that's always been
mm,
something as someone where I was privy to a lot of that, but like that was something that just didn't connect with me initially when I was getting
right,
into heavy music. It's just like the super abstract um like storytelling aspects. But let's save
yeah,
that for a little towards the back half. Let's talk about Singosugabog officially. Before we get into the actual origin story of that, the age old question that I think you've talked about a little bit, and I think it's on other aspects of the band's documentation. Coming up with that name, uh, like talk to me about the origin of that because the first
yeah,
time that I heard of you guys, I was like, oh, I'm gonna struggle real hard to figure out this shit before I hear it in an interview or someone else saying it.
yeah. It's funny, we give different origin stories to the band's name, and then it wasn't until recently I was like, you know what, I'll uh I'll actually put it out there, like what the actual meaning of the name is.
Right.
Because at first, like, you just really like to dick with people about it. But the actual like reason why we like stuck with it is just because it's such a tongue twister. Um, it was mainly just supposed to be a band that was so obscure, but yet so heavy and so like head shaking heavy that almost anybody, even outside of death metal, could kind of get into it.
Hmm.
And then they're like, "Who is this band?" When they ask, like, "We want you to try to butcher the name." And but so the actual meaning of the name is Sanguisuga, which is Latin for like uh, like a leech, something that sucks blood.
Right.
And then bog is, we've said like it's a toilet or it's a body of water or it's this and that, is actually an older Slavic term for a divine being, like an entity or a god. So the idea of it is just you look at God as like a holy entity that you can praise or worship, except this kind of God siphons blood and life out of you.
I see. Okay.
Yeah. So something like methodical and just weird. And that was like the whole theme of the band, like going on was like we're going to talk about like weird bodily functions and things happening to people's bodies that don't happen. You're contorted a certain way, or you're tortured a certain way, or there's like body horror involved. And it all kind of came into play with that name.
Yeah. So like you're coming with these Slavic and these Latin words, like is that because someone's like secretly like, going to school for all these like, secondary languages, or is it like stuff that you're pulling from other aspects that
It
inspired you
was
that way?
Yeah, it was more so like a fantasy aspect.
Mm.
Because there's certain creatures and like old fables and everything that have the word bog in the name.
Oh,
So it
okay.
was kind of a play on that. And that's how like our original demo artwork, we wanted like a like three-headed creature that looks like it would be in a children's fable book. But he looks like one that parties or something, or one that's just like creepy. So that was kind of like the whole theme. And originally we had talked about wearing like studded armor and painting ourselves before we played shows and stuff.
Oh,
So
so
yeah, we
almost
were
like a guar kind of
yeah, yeah,
like, okay.
yeah. Something just like really obscure and like what the hell are these guys doing? Like we really wanted to like up that like in the beginning, like the very beginning of the band. But then once we were like, we got so many shows lined up already, we don't have the time for that shit. And I'm gonna
Right.
sweat all that shit off. So like I'll just be me, forget it.
Right. Yeah, yeah. I praise the bands and give kudos to people that do add that extra little bit of aesthetic, but at the same time, it's like unless it's like if it enhances the vibe, like
Yeah,
it needs to enhance the vibe more than point one. It's got to be like that's why I think Guar works is that they have the
yeah,
over the top shit. But if you're just adding extra stuff that's like in the end it's like delaying changeover times and it's maybe even creating problems during your live set, maybe it's better just to rock the jeans and hoodie combo and just call it a
yeah,
day.
for sure. And then like it also like I mean we even talked about after we got picked up by a label that maybe we can like put in some theatrical aspects of the band. And it's just like we got people killing and moshing like so hard that shit's gonna get knocked over. It's just gonna be we're gonna get dished a bill every night.
Right.
There's really no point in that. So we kept the core element of the name and like the whole gimmick. I think that's behind it now is the band so hard the name's got to be hard. You
Right.
know.
That's fair. Speaking of the name, so we explained some of the lore, but an obvious question that I wanted to ask is what's the worst pronunciation of that name that someone has either said to you in person or you've heard on a video or anything like that?
Yeah, it was recent. I wouldn't say butchering it, but kind of like someone making fun of it was
Oh,
when we
okay.
were on the Cannibal Corpse tour. Me and George Fisher like hanging out and talking, and he was like, everyone in the band is calling you Samsung Sudafed, and I was like, why the hell did I not think of that? Because I've like thought of like so many like renditions of it. My favorite thing to like go back to is Ace Ventura when Nature Calls, when he goes Chicago, Shikishi, and he's like trying to say Chicago.
Yeah.
And yeah, and he's just like running through a bunch of different words.
Right.
So I like that, or like I'm a huge Jim Carrey nerd. So when he's talking about the briefcase, trying to get Mary Swanson's name, he's like Samsonite. I was way off. But yeah, I think the best one I've heard is Samsung Sudafed. That's hilarious.
Samsung Sudafed.
Yeah,
Yeah. I think the wildest thing is like if you were trying to do like if there was like a version of like heavy music Scrabble, like like getting all the characters to be able to spell that out would just be like, you know, that's almost like I don't know if you're a Yu-Gi-Oh head, but like it's like you're getting all the cards of Exodia and it's like instant game over if you
Yeah,
can spell Sanguisugabogg that way.
yeah, I like that. My dad would give up trying to explain people like my band's name because it's the first thing they'd ask. Oh, what's your son's band's name? And he's just like, I just call them their alphabet soup band. He just saw a bunch of letters and was like, yeah, that's it. Let's run
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, because there's like, do you guys have any like abbreviations of that? Because like a band like Misery Signals would over time just everyone calls it Ms. Sigs because it's just easier to say. But
Yeah,
is there any like stuff that either you guys say or fans have said?
yeah, yeah. Especially around here, like they say, people say sang or people say sangui, or
Saying
they'll
okay,
say the Bog Boys or the Bog.
the Pog Boys. I like that.
Yeah. So that's like mainly common, and it's cool because like when people say it, it's almost like it's like a nickname or like
Right,
it when we hear it, it feels very personable and like almost like you're from our hood. So
right.
sweet.
Yeah. You were mentioning a little bit earlier about like the artwork and the monsters that
Mhm.
have like, gone into the aesthetics. So one of the questions I have was if you put the pornographic Caesar's monster against the tortured whole monster, like
Mhm.
King Kong versus Godzilla style,
Yeah.
how do you think that plays out?
Oh, I would say was this is the cool thing about it. It's almost taking like an ancient fable versus like a sci-fi movie.
Yes.
There's like one thing that's going to be pack a punch, and you can't underestimate old man strength. And then there's the one that has like all the gadgets and all the guns and stuff too. So
Right.
I think as far as like that personally goes, I would say the tortured whole monster would just beat the ever living shit out of the pornographic seizures monster because it's based on like the assimilation part and the thing. John Carpenter's
Oh.
The Thing.
Mhm.
So it's like loosely based on that. So I feel like you can't even kill it with fire. So good luck.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, but
Yeah,
like I like how you added that is kind of like an ancient thing versus something that's a little bit more sci-fi focused
yeah.
because I can definitely pull from both of those things. Is there any like inspirations for this band on the artistic side that like, there's obvious ones, but are there any ones that you're like these are deeper cuts that not as many people pick up on?
Um, yeah. We just kind of wanted to. It's just kind of us being a little bit different, and we like bands that do a lot of weird, different stuff. Like there's this punk band that I really like. They're called Lumpy and the Dumpers, and they do the most outlandish like artwork you could ever think of. Just like little bubbled creatures and like monsters that someone's drawing from the band, and they have like dicks and stuff in it, and it is kind of like our way of doing that is like you have your typical death metal band that showcases gore, showcases like a landscape of like evilness or darkness or torture. We, on the other hand, are like, yeah, let's go the society like campy horror route and just put a bunch of different bodies that don't belong together and smash them up and make a evil thing look cute or make it look and disturbing in the same way. So it was kind of our way of taking like your original ideas of like what death metal artwork should be and just like making it do a headstand and turning it completely around.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like that's it's cool to hear that you guys have that perspective because I think a lot of people when they're like whether they're doing a death metal band or like a New York hardcore band, they kind of get stuck in the tropes of like, well, this works, so we're just gonna do that. But like,
Yeah.
whether it's your guys' artwork or some of the merch items that you guys have, like it seems like you guys are always like, okay, like how can we do this just a little bit differently and like push the boundaries just a little bit more.
Yeah. Yeah. That's kind of been our play on it. And then we want, whenever we're dropping like a certain merch spread or album art, we want everything to fit with one another. So like this is a whole other world of Sangwasugabog that you're like going into and exploring.
Right. So speaking of merch, one of the questions I had was like, there's like classic, four-sided death metal like long sleeves that,
Mhm.
are like tried and true, just doing the logo on the front of the tee will work for any band of any genre. But what in your opinion has been the wildest piece of merch that you guys have put out that was in theory a risky play as far as like, oh, we're making hundreds of these, depending on the scale of it.
Yeah.
But it actually worked out. Do any come to mind there?
A lot. Um, like early on, we did a long sleeve. It was like our pride long sleeve because we had logo and a rainbow like variant. And then on the back, I hate this. It wasn't my idea. I swear to you, but it said I eat my own cum on it, and that did very well. Which
Was that a
blew
pre-order
everyone
or were
else's
you
mind.
like we're only making X number of these?
Um, well, I mean, it was through a distribution. It was through Holy Mountain,
Okay.
so they were like, "We're gonna make as many as people want to order." So people were ordering way more than we ever thought like would have been ordered. And then
Are we
another
talking
one
like hundreds or even higher than that?
higher than that. There, yeah,
Really?
yeah, a lot of people had it. It was weird. Like we would find out like there'd be parents and stuff that bought it, and I don't own it because just only because of what it says on the back. Like I can't rock that.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
get
I
I get
can't be at
laughed
the
at.
grocery store and someone's like, "Excuse me."
Right.
You're like, "No, no,
Like,
no. I'm not here for that conversation."
yeah. Like I've had that enough already. So, but and then like growing up rocking like red cord merch and some of the weird shit that I rocked as a kid, like I'd have grown ass people coming up to me like ready to hand me a Bible template or something. So I can't be doing that shit as
Yeah,
an
let's just
adult.
dodge that bullet.
Yeah. But that one comes to mind. And then on the terror run, um, we kind of wanted to take like a little, not like a stab, but like a playful like kind of joke about the whole like Mayo-esque like artwork of the like graffiti dude and the crazy like cartoon aspects that like a lot of hardcore bands like ride on. And I love
Right.
that shit. And we wanted to do a wild style like graffiti logo of our logo, and we did. And then the artwork ended up being like it was Bugs Bunny smacking Lola Bunny's ass. And
That was on
we
my list of contenders for me. I was like, "This
yeah,
is
yeah.
crazy."
And we like I just thought like that's a funny ass design.
Right.
Twitter like to say that it was like a furry thing, and I was just like, yeah, dude, I'm not into that like at all. That's not me. I'm
Right.
not wearing a dog mask. I ain't going to that shit. But but
Was that
whatever.
was that post Space Jam 2, I guess? Because a lot of people were upset when that movie was coming out, how they kind of like watered down Low
Yeah,
Bunny's hotness. But you
yeah,
you
yeah,
kept
yeah,
it original for the shirt.
yeah. I mean, I think it's weird already, like sexualizing like cartoons and stuff, like something kind of aimed for a certain audience, but like Lola Bunny is like 60 years old if you think about it, and she's looking good, man. But
Right.
and what's crazy is like it got so many like polar like reactions from it. Like on one end, like people were like, you know, or people like shit on it. But at the same time, there were so many chicks that bought it. Yeah, that's the last type of kind of people I would think would buy it is like
Sure.
chicks, and they love the design. That when we did 3.5 weeks with Terror and Kubla Khan, and we did some headlining shows, and then we did Cannibal Corpse. The one design that people would just like beg for, and we had to keep like reprinting was that design. So
Interesting.
um, because we originally wanted to do it for like an LDB like exclusive,
Right.
and we didn't have the time to print it, so we saved it for that tour, and it became really popular, and as like funny and stuff as I thought it was, I don't I don't have it hanging up in my closet because anything that any shirt that I have, like it's a shirt that I would have no problem with wearing in front of
Sure.
somebody, or
Right.
like and that's basically my whole attire is like you're lucky to catch me in a collared shirt. If I do, it's because someone died or someone's getting married,
Sure.
and so I rock a lot of band merch, and any band shirt that I have is something that I'd be comfortable enough wearing at like my nephew's first communion or something, so
Yeah, you're not gonna rock the low bunny at that
yeah, 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 for the
specific.
Christmas card.
Yeah, but I do like again. I think it's like a lot of people. It it's interesting because when bands do riskier plays like that,
Mm,
there's always people on the internet who will be like, "Why would you purchase that?" But at the end of the day, it's like what like people are gonna like either gonna buy it and then like okay that was worth it or they won't and you're like oh well we're gonna be sitting on a box of these
yeah,
for a minute but yeah it's interesting just to like to go like that going a little wilder than just like here's the fucking name and the live shot on the back like
yeah,
that's almost like less likely to sell these days versus something that's like this is
yeah,
so abstract and wild I need to own this.
for sure. And like we do it just because you know with the amount of touring that we do, and it calls for having to put out merch a lot, and especially with albums only being a year or 2 years apart from each other, we're always going to have to keep things updated and put things out there. So
Right.
sometimes we get bored and we're just like, let's put a fucking goofy one, and like let's just do this but silly,
Yeah.
but so like sometimes we're just like, what about this? LOL. And they're like, no, let's run it. And I'm like, I don't know. And then
Yeah.
I'm like, fuck it. But I
Have
mean,
there
there's
been I was just gonna ask, have there been any designs where it's like you've actually had to pump the brakes and it never saw the light of day?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Um, there was like a G string idea um that had like our album name and our logo on it on the crotch, and I was like, that's too much, you know. But I was like, but I'm down to do G strings and whatever. I'll do hammocks or whatever the
I
crowd
mean, there's
calls for.
enough G's in your band's name that it almost
Yeah,
feels like
that'd
it's supposed to be.
be
So,
fun. A double G
if you're
string.
watching or listening and you want a Sangusugabogg G string, comment that below.
Oh
Let's if the people want it, we can make it happen. Um,
yeah.
Devin, you were mentioning like, some of the like past tours that you've done. And I think and this is maybe a transition question into talking about like this new wave of bands that's kind of hitting the hardcore market. And I always use hardcore as a pretty broad term as far as like, you got your classic stuff, you got your punk, you got your metalcore, you
Yeah.
got your death metal, you got your thrash, but it's all within the same kind of um silo when it comes to shows and tours. But like I think you guys specifically, I would see you guys touring with, like you said, like Cannibal Corpse, and then you're also doing like a supporting thing with Terror. So
Yeah,
like, how was that the initial goal with this band to like, oh, we're gonna be like cross, cross genre and being able to play to different audiences, or did that just happen naturally with fans picking you guys up in in music genres that you didn't anticipate?
yeah. I think it's kind of a little bit of both because it's heavy, so it makes sense to for people that like it are people that are also into hardcore.
Right.
I look at hardcore more than just like bands and music. It's it's a community, man, and a lot of strictly hardcore bands they sing about where they come from. So it's communal. It's a group of people. It's an attitude, and there's a saying that goes in a hot or not in a hot, in a hardcore that's real recognize real, and us touring with Terror was basically like them nodding to us saying like we know how hard you guys are ready to hit the road, so let's see if you have what it takes to hang with like one of the like sickest and the sickest bands to ever tour because they tore their asses off, man, and they always have like since the very beginning.
Mhm.
So that was a cool thing about this like past year is like touring with Terror and Kubla Khan, who have nonstop toured, then touring with the Acacia Strain, which is also who are also known for just touring and touring and touring like crazy year after year. And same with Full of Hell. They'll jump on like any kind of tour. So it was basically like the OGs of grinding your ass off on the road, saying like, "Come on, come aboard,
Yeah.
do this tour with us. See if you really have like what it takes."
Hmm.
Um, so that's how I kind of looked at it. And then like with us being kind of arm in arm with like the hardcore scene and community, I just think it comes with the attitude, our style of music, having mosh parts specifically, and also dance parts, like parts you could throw ass to if you wanted to, and it just transitions well with a lot of hardcore bands that we listen to. And another thing too is like, I've seen Sworn Enemy with Dying Fetus when I was a kid, and
Mm.
there a lot of that was going down in New York, specifically. Like Irate would be playing with Internal Bleeding or Suffocation, and it made sense. Like you saw it on a flyer, and it's like that makes sense. And then I just think what came out of that was like deathcore, which was just a little too like monotone for people like me, where it was just too almost too much of its own thing instead of blending the two genres together.
Mm.
And I think this new revival is a nod to hardcore, but heavy. And like I said, hardcore is it's more than just music. It's that DIY, like having your hand in everything that's in your band. And it's also the communal thing where it's like, I fuck with you, you fuck with me. That's why we're both here,
Right.
type of thing. So
Yeah.
it's unity. And that's the kind of people we are in our band. Like we hold ourselves accountable to a certain standard that we wouldn't let anybody fall under. And if you fuck with us, then we'll literally get the shirt off our back for you guys. So
Right. Yeah, no, I think I totally agree that like as cliche as it sounds, it's more of a mindset than a style of music.
absolutely.
And I've had people on the podcast where it's like their bands have scaled to a point where they are playing with bands that don't come from
Mhm.
this kind of underground thing, so they don't have like a DIY attitude, and they just assume that so and so is going to take care of it, or so have you played with bands um who it kind of catches you off guard that you're like, oh, like we don't we're playing the exact same style of music to a degree, but like we don't think the same that way because they don't come from like a hardcore or punk or DIY background.
Yeah. I mean, out of any of the tours that we did, you know, there's only been like one or two bands that have this opinion of themselves that they could shit out diamonds. You know, like everything they touch is fucking, you know. And
Sure.
it's like I can't live that certain way, man. Like me and my friends were just so humble to even play a show in our hometown is it's a gift, you know.
Mm,
It's because something like that, as small as that, could just be quickly taken away from you. That you know we're so appreciative of everything that we do in this journey, and but yeah, you know there have been certain bands that we have toured with, you know, not too recently, but that were like they just held themselves to a certain pedestal that we were like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be like that. And it kind of left a bad taste in our mouth. And then from that, when we started touring with like Terror and everything from then on, it was more like, damn, I'm hanging out with Scott Vogel right now. And he's like so cool to me. And he's like, he's treating me like I'm no different than him.
right.
And the dude's just down to talk to you and chill with you. And I'll tell you what, man, like touring with Terror, especially, um, made me realize just how cool your favorite band can be
Hmm.
on a way deeper like aspect than just the music and the stuff that they write about and ride for.
Yeah, that's
And
interesting.
yeah, and it's inspiring too because like I look at a band like that and I look at a band like the Acacia Strain and it's just like that's what I want, man. You know, so I don't look at any band that we tour with any different. And if they're just starting out or they're struggling to get somewhere, I want to lift them up with us. And
Yeah.
that's why I always ride for a lot of the local bands in Ohio. And it's why I ride for a lot of my friends' bands and stuff too. Or if you're a fan of us and you're like, yo, check out my band. If I have the time, I'm checking it out, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, like I feel like that's such a necessary outlook to have. And it's really interesting to hear that Scott wanted to take you guys out, not specifically off of like, oh, like we're gonna if we bring out Sangusugabog, we're gonna get the death metal crowd for a terror show. It's like
Yeah.
I see these guys as like, having the touring potential and I want to like foster that and like encourage
Mm-hmm.
that. And yeah, like I think that it's very, you know, I grew up with Comeback Kid being like my local band that I was like listening to and getting exposed to, and the whole mantra of like all my heroes are dead and
Yeah.
never meet your heroes. But like there are definitely people that I've met through this podcast or just in general that they have met the expectations of their level of like leadership or their influence on the scene. So, and that's hard to kind of to match because there's so many different types of interactions for someone like Scott. And he's a human, so he might be grumpy one day, and then someone's like, "Oh, when I met him, he was a dick" or whatever. But um,
Yeah.
any time that like I've talked to him once on the podcast, and anytime I've talked to him in person, or other people have talked about them, it's always been positive things. And I think for you to have that same mindset for in 5 years time when Sangusugabog is the band that's like, oh, we want to bring out XYZ bands for this tour, I think that's really cool how you're planning on keeping it full circle that way.
Of course, man. Like I said, touched on earlier, you know, we're so appreciative. And, you know, sometimes I like to think that everyone in this band wanted to do this as a career so badly, you know, from the moment we were kids that it just kind of manifested into that and we got
Right.
lucky. And we see that type of spark in other people. And when we see that, we want to, we want to make that feeling a reality for them, and we want them to get a taste of what it's like. Because as like excruciating as it is, and how as demanding and everything it can be, especially touring, like going into a 1 o'clock load in and not doing anything until like 10 o'clock at night. It's still one of the coolest things in the entire world, and it's way cooler than anything else I could be doing.
Hmm.
So, and I would really like anybody that really wants that out of life to get that.
Hmm. When it comes to playing like hardcore shows versus like exclusively like more metal or death metal shows,
Mhm.
what's the pro and con for each of those? Specifically if you're going to A/B test them.
Yeah. It all really depends, like, what kind of shows they are. Because you could say death metal, but if it's a band that has like moshing parts and stuff, those shows are a lot of fun. If it's some like boot and boot and strap, like serious ass dudes that are like militant about it, you're gonna see a lot of people crossing your arms like while you're playing,
Right.
and they don't like to be called motherfucker. So, and there's nothing more empowering than calling a crowd of people motherfucker. I love it. But
Hmm.
and then same with hardcore shows are kind of the same way, man. Like, I mean, I was 13 years old going to shows. The only shows I was allowed to get into was hardcore shows because a lot of them were DIY, all age spots, youth center spots, churches, like all kinds of weird shit that people were just like, let's have a show here. And it's like,
Right.
okay. So, the first style of like live music in a scene that I was ever exposed to was hardcore.
Hmm.
And, you know, I know because I was one of those people at one point is like, I'm not moshing until my friend's band plays, you know?
Right.
So everyone knows why I'm here. Everyone knows what hoodie I'm wearing, So like, there's bands like, there's times like that. Like we would play a show that's exclusively hardcore, and people are like, I'm not getting down with this band because it's not the band I came here to see, and I'm not going to give them a chance.
Right.
Um, with me, yeah, I still hold on to like a little bit of an elitist side of me on any kind of style of music I listen to, and that's just me being a music nerd. But at the same token, like, you're on a flyer, I have the time to see you and check you out. I'm gonna I'm gonna see what you got and see if I can get into it. And if I get
Hmm.
into it, I'm going all the way into it.
Right.
So, but I would say those are the cons. It's just like hitting different, not markets, just certain kind of people. Like, you wanting to connect to them so bad, but I can read it on someone's face or their arms, and they're not fucking with it. But at
Yeah.
the same time, what's weird, and I'm sure you experience it too, is you'll look at somebody in the crowd and you're like, damn, they just ain't fucking with it. But then, because of the way they look, but then they'll come to you and they'll be like, yo, that was sick. And it's like, then why didn't you look like you were having a good time? Like,
Right.
why aren't you like, you look mad, like you just got a bad phone call or something, you know?
Yeah.
And so like I sometimes I'm completely wrong about it. And that's like Europe. Europe's a different world too. Is like we played Austria, and it's just like, are these people like down with this, or are they thinking it's weird? And then by the end of the night, I just realized, oh no, they're all drunk, like off their ass. They don't even know what's up right now. So,
Right.
uh, and then on the plus side of everything, like, dude, like the cool thing about being like the sore thumb on the bill and playing an exclusive hardcore show, but you're a band that has like aspects in your band that the typical hardcore fan won't like really fast drumming, blast beats, and like triggered like double bass and guttural vocals that you don't understand because you
Right.
can't sing it back. There's no crowd shouts and stuff. So like, the plus side on that is kind of being the heaviest band on the bill in its own way.
Hmm.
Um, and in that, people respect you and they nod their hats off to you. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Because they're like, damn, you had the balls to like pull that out. Like, that's cool. And I fuck with it because of this. And then like they see the parts in our band that, is that hardcore kind of attitude. It's funny when we were in Berlin, someone told me you guys remind me of One Life Crew, and I was like, we are not a band like that at all. Tell me we're Blue Life's Crew, fuck out of here. But
Bro, that's so funny.
yeah, he was just like, no, you were just like playing with your hood up and jumping around. It's just like it's just how I get into stuff.
Yeah.
I literally I told the guy I was just I thought he was taking with me, so I was just like, nah, dude, I've never listened to hardcore ever in my life, you know. But yeah, so like touching that base, like when bands like hear the kind of stuff that is reminiscent to the style of hardcore that we like, like I mean, I still listen to shit like Marauder, Irate, um, all kinds of stuff, and they hear that part, or they hear it when I talk and when I'm talking to people and talking to people about being there for one another and stuff like that. More people fuck with it, and damn well, wherever state you're playing, if I'm in PA and I'm shouting out PA bands, or I'm shouting out this is for Pennsylvania hardcore, they're going off, you
Right.
know.
Yeah.
So like
It's a roll call.
it is, yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
it's literally like stand up, get out of here. And no death metal bands are doing that, but like
Right.
maybe us and a few. And
Right.
so that's always sweet. And then playing exclusive death metal shows, something that we found out, like the only, if you don't include the Cannibal Corpse, us, and 200 Stab Wounds tour that we did, um, really the only exclusive like kind of death metal tour that we did was that Nile and Incantation tour.
Right.
We were like the exciting band. We were the talk about band. So in that we were like the almost like the here's the cool part of the show, and then here's the end of the show. And that's no disrespect, because like those other bands are great at what they do, and we're also great at what we do. And something that we do is like we get a reaction out of you. Like you either want to shove that person that's right next to you, or you want to fucking throw beer cans, or something. And like,
Right.
and I liked all the bands that were on that bill every night. I was going so hard to Incantation every night because they had like insatiable grooves, dude, and it's very like doomish and stuff, and I really like it. I've always liked it for years.
Mm.
Because like some of the members lived in Ohio for a long time. I used to go to school with the guitar player's girlfriend growing up, so like we had that connection already, and I love that band. But like we were that band that like everyone's like, what's this about? And then we were the ones that were bringing kids to the shows.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that was cool. When the weird part about that is you have those militant fans, just like you do in any genre, that are like, I'm not going to enjoy this. I'm going to force myself to not like it. So,
Right.
uh, dealing with that kind of sucks. But yeah, that's the yin and yang for those kind of shows.
Yeah. And that like that was a question I wanted to ask is like and people that gatekeep they're in punk, they're in hardcore, they're in metal, it kind of doesn't
Mhm.
matter. But I think to me, I see all this new wave of death metal, hardcore adjacent bands as like as base hits to be able to like push, expand the community just even more and getting more
Yeah.
people to shows in both genres. But I think there's definitely some people in the metal sphere that are very particular about their subgenre of death metal or
Mhm.
metal in general. So, what's been maybe the biggest hot take someone has made about your band in that kind of vein? or any like misconceptions that you just are like, it's time to break those?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So like that's the thing is with this like hardcore adjacent death metal, it's crazy because it's not a new thing necessarily.
Hmm.
I'll back, just like 8 to 10 years ago, we had a lot of the HM2 clones that were hardcore adjacent. You had
Mhm.
Black Breath, you had Gate Creeper just coming out, and a bunch of bands that were touching base on like that Swedish style of death metal, but making it making it hardcore adjacent and mosh friendly. And
Mhm.
the stigma that we get from hardcore fans is like it's not strictly meat and potatoes hardcore, you know.
Right.
So they won't give it a chance. But it's just like dog, like, but you listen to bands like Turnstile and Title Fight, which I do too. They're not straight up hardcore, you know.
Right.
But aren't they? Well, aren't they amazing at what they do? Absolutely. And I swear to God, if I'm at a Title Fight show, I'm moshing. So like, you know, and
Right.
I'm
No,
crying
totally.
at the same time, and I'm about to hug my friend. Like,
Right.
but so it's always weird. The one criticism that I don't understand from death metal, especially when it's directed like towards our band, and that's another thing too, is like us being adjacent. As much as it calls for like a mixing pot of people to be into it, it's also in a way setting yourself up as a target for more people to hate it because it's not one particular thing.
Mm.
You know, it's it's two different things that they don't think blend in together, but really a lot of these new bands are doing a great job of blending the things together.
Yeah.
One thing that I don't understand from, you know, I'd say some of the death metal community is that um, they like to assume that we just recently got into this kind of music and that we're so new to the game and we don't know anything about it. And it's like we're posers.
Mm.
And it's like, that's not the case. Like, I might have been born at a different year than somebody, but that doesn't mean that I'm not buying records and I'm not finding out music on my own and going to shows and things like that. Like, I might be from a different era, but just because my age is a different number than someone else's, that doesn't mean I'm not true to what I like,
Right.
And like
Mhm.
I have bands that are tattooed on me that no one's heard of. I have like a Gorgasm tattoo on the back of my leg, and then it's a brutal death metal band. And I got that tattoo like years ago. Or like I'm rocking this band, Eternal Suffering, which nobody hears about at all. They're like a band from New Jersey that was swept under the rug, and they had some like crazy ass grooves and stuff. And so it's like people just say, "Oh, because I have short hair and I like to throw down the hardcore here and there," like that I don't know shit about death metal. And it's not the case, man. Like I know shit about all kinds of music. I'm a nerd, dude. Like we could do a whole podcast on indie rock if you wanted to, because I love it. So like I that's people's perspective on a lot of these newer bands, and it's just like, dude, if you don't really know me or haven't talked to me, like, where are you coming up with this kind of opinion?
Right.
You know, and like we do a lot of nods because like the bands that we like, and a lot of death metal bands, and a lot of hardcore bands too, as well, and a lot of bands that are just straight up metal, like Gojira and Meshuggah. Like, if you don't fuck with those bands at least a little bit, what are you doing? Because they're amazing. So
I think
yeah.
it's very easy for people to something pops up on their radar, and I think a lot of people are lazy to like do even just a tad bit of research of like
Mhm.
where that person's, the lore of that person, and they just make a quick judgment call based off of looks
Yeah.
or just like their initial like 2 cents on it.
Mhm.
And it's almost like there's a gold rush to be able to like talk shit on like on that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. And I don't know, I've learned, way earlier in life just like, bite my tongue and like even just take a second to do that and be like, oh, okay. So I would have been so out of pocket just to like assume that this person like was not into hardcore and is just like profiting off of like the culture off of that. So
Yeah,
like it's wild to me that there is a bit of that, but like I think true people I think real bullshit like that can be like sniffed out pretty quickly, but I do think that you need to have like you need to know your shit when you're going to be calling out things like that. So like
for
it's
sure.
wild that people just with you know the the wacky usernames and the very limited followers will just make these
Yeah,
outrageous claims about what is and shouldn't be a part of the community, where it's like I've been in this shit like longer than maybe you've even existed,
right.
like
I look at it as like you would have never guessed that everybody in Fallout Boy would have been into power violence. You know
right,
what I'm saying?
totally.
But they are. They fuck with it. So it's like, you don't know what's up, man. Like, cause we've had some people come to the show, like come to shows and met people, and or at least come across a lot of people online, like interactions and stuff, and we're like, yo, you're into this kind of stuff. And I'm not gonna name drop or anything because that's corny, but like certain like high profile people that were like, wow, you fuck with us. That's wild. I would never have guessed.
Right.
So
Are these high
yeah,
profile people within the music community or just like just in the high profile people in general?
high profile people in general.
Okay.
Some in music, some in film and everything too. That we're like, yo, I can't believe this person's messaging me right now. This is insane. So,
Right.
um,
I kind
but
of want
yeah,
you to name drop at like one of these.
um, yeah. I mean, we've had a couple like I'll tell you one like
Yeah.
that kind of blew my mind that we talked to each other like back and forth a little bit, but was Juliette Lewis, the actress. She's in like Cape Fear and
Oh, okay.
Starts Hutch, Old School and stuff. She was in one of the Vacation movies.
Mm.
She's a confirmed rocker. So
Very much so.
I thought that was dope. So and then aside from that, like just like mutual friends telling me like, oh yeah, my friend so and so fucks with your band. And it's like, damn. So that's sick.
Yeah.
Um, Khalil Roundtree was another one. He's a UFC fighter. Um, he fucks with us heavy. When I found that out, I was like, damn, that's sick. So, but yeah, yeah, and then some others, but yeah. So like, they always say don't judge a book by its cover, and it's just like, so when people say that we are hardcore kids playing death metal, like, yeah, you're right, but we're also death metal kids playing death metal too. So,
Right.
you know,
You know, talking about this whole wave of new bands, obviously there's a number of bands that come to mind in addition to you guys. I think the two undeniable names are definitely 200 Stab Wounds and Body Box as well.
mm,
Um, are there any maybe smaller bands that either you've seen that like are still within that just need a little bit more attention or exposure that
yeah,
would that you want to plug?
for sure. I wouldn't consider them small on any scale, per se. Um, because not only just when I see them, but in my heart, dude, they're literally the greatest group of people we've ever come in contact with, man. And that's of the newer wave, especially. It's Vomit Forth. Um,
Yes.
they do my favorite parts in hardcore and my favorite parts in death metal in such a unique and organic way. And not only their attitude and aesthetic and their music is such a beautiful thing, but they are also as people, hands down, some of the coolest motherfuckers I've ever met. I will ride for that band until the fucking wheels fall off. I love that band with every
Hmm.
bit of me.
Yeah. That's a great pick. I remember, I think they put out some music during the high point of COVID, and I think I put it on the playlist, and I was like right in the midst of, like, just getting a little bit more um versed in some of that stuff. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's a great pick.
And
Um
I think we're, just like us, we're also the band that, like, as they are too. You on sonically, like on recording, it's probably not gonna hit or as touch you as hard as, like, seeing it live and being in that atmosphere.
mhm,
Because us especially, like, I'll be the one to say, like, I don't think sonically and songwriting wise that we've done anything that I've personally been proud of until this new record comes out.
mm,
Um, that the full length that we dropped in 2021, like, for what it was, it, like, as a collaborative, like, output between us and everyone else in the band, it was cool to be a part of. It was kind of our, like, fuck you to the, like, we're on a big label, like, we're gonna do something completely out of left field that no band that gets this kind of break would do. Just
right.
as kind of like a fuck you to it. But this record is something that I've been extremely a part of or proud of. And I've touched base on stuff that I've always wanted to write songs about that I would have never gotten the chance to if we had, like, the previous lineup and stuff that we had. So,
Yeah.
and same with Falmouth Fourth, man, is like a lot of their early recording stuff. They're done. The vocalist is like Laptop. That's Kane. Has a hand in all that stuff, man, and he's so fucking dope, dude. But you hear that band live, and you could tell they're not they're not taking a break for one fucking second. Like, they are literally playing their hearts out on there. It's
Mm,
so badass.
yeah. So maybe one of the last points that we can head towards the close on:
Mhm.
new album dropping in February of 2023. Homicidal Ecstasy.
Yep.
Um, what's the maybe the one of what's the biggest thing that you hope fans of the band and new fans as well take away from that record, either on a sonic side or lyrical aspect?
Yep. You know, a lot of people like to nitpick lyrics, which is fun because, like, especially on the demo that demo was a deathful freestyle. I came up, like, it was all off the top of my dome. That's a weird trick that I picked up as a kid was, I would smoke a blunt, and if you had a beat going, I'm freestyling over it. So it was the same thing, but I was doing it in the studio for a death metal band.
Sure.
And then, the full length, it was me just, like, trying to please everybody as much as I can and not be just your cookie cutter death metal band, and really just find words that fit a certain pattern more so than putting actual thought into it. Um, for this record lyrically, something that I wrote, I did something that a brutal band would never do, man. And, like, I wrote a song about my grandmother. It was, she raised me, and she passed away back in 2020. And I get hit with the news that she has this, like, cancer, but they've caught it early enough to where they could try to fight it. And then she does her first radiation treatment, and then it's she could die at any moment. And so I'm hit with waves of, like, how I'm feeling, and it was the one death that I spent years trying to prepare myself for because I knew when she dies, a part of me is going to die with her.
Mm,
And because they don't make people like grandparents, man. Like, a grandmother's love is so pure for their grandchild. It's untouched, and I wanted to make a song about how important that person was to me in my life, and being hit with the idea of her being gone, and then she is gone, and it's like, what do I do from there? Do I stick around and just mourn forever, or do I do what she's always wanted me to do with life? And I live for her, not live like being sad about it all the time. And I wrote a song about that, and it's it's the most emotional song that I've ever like put pen to paper to, and it's probably the first song I've ever written that is very meaningful. And then like a lot, some of these songs also they touch base on certain themes that like are out there for people, because like something I've learned about touring and meeting people is there are people that, even though your music is crazy and you know out of left field, they resonate with it, and they basically look at you as like, your band was there for me for this moment in my life, and you guys helped me just by listening to you guys.
Right.
So I touched base on this album with a lot of inner struggle, and a lot of weird stuff like self harm and stuff too. So I wanted to get a little bit more personable on it, because the whole theme around the album is homicidal. So it's death related. It's how your body copes with death, or how your mind can certainly cope with death. And then ecstasy, which is just pertaining to emotion, and whether it's a state of euphoria, a state of fear, a state of being sad, or a state of being happy. It's just how you pertain to it. And I came up with like a bunch of different stories that touch base on it. Like there's a loving story, there's a sad story, there's a story that'll pick you up, and there's a story that's calling you a piece of shit. So it's probably the most thought out, definitely, well, it is definitely the most thought out thing I've ever touched on lyrically. And then as musically, like everybody had a hand in it. I even have some riffs on the album, which is tight. And I just think that any song that's on the record is better than any song in our catalog right now. And it's pretty fucking cool, man, to say, like, after so many years of just being in bands and playing music, that I'm finally proud 100% all the way through of something that I'm a part of. So,
Mm.
and everyone could say the same.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you being very open about that, and like that I feel like there are people that can relate to some of those things, whether it was a grandparent or another family member. So I'm personally very very excited to be able to hear this new addition to you guys, and like having it be a little bit more methodical as far as like what
Yeah,
you're writing about versus like how crazy can it be. The music's still gonna be crazy, but there's
yeah,
a deeper layer to that. So that's really really cool to hear. Devin, this is a conversation where I feel like we've stretched to both extremes, where we're talking about crazy merch with Bugs Bunny and Lil Bunny on it to all the way to this side. But to me, that means that we've hit on all the bases for a great podcast episode. I've been
uh,
really enjoying talking to you. The very
likewise.
last question that I ask every guest that comes on the show, and this is how we end every episode, is a favorite Mosh related story that you would like to share. And that's anything that's first to your head. That could be wholesome, gruesome. You did it, it happened to you, or it was just at a show that you were attending. Whatever's first to your dome is how we start to end the show.
Yeah. Uh, Shout out to the Fubu Flyer from LDB, because that is our dog. He has been to a shit ton of our shows. He's traveled his ass off uh, for a lot of our shows too, which is sick. And when we played Dallas, Texas back in 2021 on our co-headlining tour with Frozen Soul, he was on a mission to get the absolute shit whipped out of him, and it was so sick because he is climbing speaker towers and doing flips, and then if someone's moshing on him, like fuck you, dude, like I'm an old fuck and I'm gonna beat your ass because you're having fun. He's like fuck you, and he just starts swinging on him, and that dude was just like fucking kill me, like, and he's putting his arms and legs back and jumping, not giving a shit if anyone's going to catch him or not, and then
Right.
still come back up and do it. So it was basically like seeing a real life Terminator just for the entire time that we were playing. And
Right.
every time he'd come up, he'd have a new mark on his face or something. And I'm like, this dude doesn't give one shred of a fuck, so much that it's aspiring. And I'm having more fun watching this guy than actually playing right now because he is feeling it.
Yeah, I was playing a festival in Tulsa, Oklahoma called Act Like You Know, where Chance, aka Fubu Man, was attending. And there was moments, I'm not a mosher per se myself, but there was a couple of bands I was like, I'll, stage dive here and there for. But
Mhm.
he was seeing him do what he does best was always enjoyable. And I think at the very end of the fest, I finally was like, "Oh, Chance!" Like, I said, "What's up?" to him. I filmed his band at another fest a year prior,
He's a
and
killer drummer.
yeah, killer drummer. And it was
Yeah,
funny. It was like, "Oh, like Chance, I'm Spencer." He's like, "Oh yeah, I've been following you for a bit." It's like, "Yeah, I've talked about you a lot on the podcast," and this is
yeah.
like just another one of those examples. But shout out to Chance. Shout out to
Shout out to
all the
Chance.
all the moshers who get a little ridic.
Oh yeah,
Devin, again, this has been really fun. All the links for the band and for yourself will be in the show notes in the description of the video. But if there's anything you want to shout out, anything you want to plug, or anything you want to send the people off with before we go, the floor is yours.
yeah, for sure. Thanks everyone for listening. If you haven't heard of us before and decided to check us out and like it, appreciate it. Thanks for fucking with us. Um, Homicidal Ecstasy will be out February 3rd next year, and we're really stoked to have it out for everybody because I feel like it's going to be the not the pinnacle, but definitely a new bar set out for our band, and hopefully you dig it. And hope to see you all at a show. Let's hang out.
Likewise, yeah. And I don't know if the Bog Boys have any Western Canada plans in the future, but I hope that there's something hopefully in the works because I would love to officially cross paths in person. And
Yeah,
Devin, thank you again for coming on the show, bro.
likewise, Spencer. Thank you so much. Yeah, we'll be in Canada next year. So